Union address. Live from Washington, George W. Bush delivers his annual report on America to Congress and the country. Tonight, you will hear the president's speech and the Democratic leadership's response. Also, we'll take an in-depth look at the candidate push and the field of Democratic contenders as we look ahead to the issues and the personalities of Decision 2004.
From Washington, D.C., the State of the Union Address. Here now, Tom Brokaw.
Good evening from the nation's capital. President George W. Bush speaks to Congress tonight and the nation on the State of the Union, a report required by the Constitution under Article 2 for a sitting president who wants to be reelected. This is a matchless opportunity to get his campaign started on his terms with a national television audience across the networks. And this is the scene tonight in the House chamber where security is exceptionally tight.
Mr. Speaker, the President's cabinet.
Members of the cabinet coming in now. There will be one missing member. The reason there is one missing member, Secretary of State Colin Powell, if something catastrophic happens in the House chamber, there would be someone to organize the government. And we're told tonight it's the President's good friend Don Evans, Secretary of Commerce, who is at an undisclosed location as his fellow cabinet members sit in the chamber and offer their support for the President of the United States. No need to introduce Don Rumsfeld, one of the best-known members of this cabinet or any cabinet in recent memory. John Ashcroft, the Attorney General, coming in right behind him, the keeper of the Patriot Act. Secretary of the Interior. Members of the U.S. Supreme Court will be there as well. Members of the United States Senate and House, and of course, a big, big buzz in that chamber tonight is the political theater of the last 24 hours with the stunning upset last night in Iowa. John Kerry going from almost worst to first in Iowa in very short order, followed closely by another sitting United States Senator, John Edwards. They're in New Hampshire tonight, not here, as they continue their campaign for the Democratic presidential nomination. I said just a few moments ago that I don't remember a time when the United States Capitol was so tightly secured as it is now, not just for this occasion, but obviously during the Orange Alert as well. There are guards everywhere, new procedures for getting in and out of the building, iron gates in the parking lots. Tom Ridge, the Director of Homeland Security. And beneath every chair in the House chamber is this foil package that contains a hood in case there is a chemical or biological attack. We don't know whether the seats in the House gallery also have these, but that is just symptomatic of what is going on in Washington, D.C. Up in the gallery, in the visitors' gallery tonight, of course, we'll see Mrs. Bush. Joyce Rumsfeld is the Secretary of the Defense Secretary. And we'll have some special guests tonight, including the Patriots quarterback, Tom Brady, who we're told has a sports camp. He happens to be from Massachusetts, the home state of John Kerry, which now has a Republican governor. I'm joined by Tim Russert, our Washington bureau chief and moderator of Meet the Press. Tim, the political operation of the White House leaves nothing to chance and seizes every opportunity.
Absolutely not, Tom. Within 12 hours of John Kerry winning the Iowa caucuses, the real hero of Boston, Tom Brady, the quarterback, sitting by the president's designation watching the State of the Union speech. You'll also hear in the president's speech, he talks about the whole issue of gay marriages, referring to court decisions, a Massachusetts court decision about same-sex marriage. This is a political speech as well as a substantive policy speech. It's a blueprint for the 2004 re-election campaign of George W. Bush.
It's also worth pointing out that while Article 2 requires the president to make a report from time to time on the State of the Union, a speech is not required, and there is no set scheduling. It is not by coincidence that this speech has been scheduled, Mrs. Bush there, that this speech has been scheduled, obviously, 24 hours after the Iowa caucuses, whatever that can do on behalf of this Republican president to keep his message in front of the American people. That was not coincidental. We're looking now for the members of the, looking for Joyce Rumsfeld. First of all, Karen Hughes is sitting in the back row there. Actually, David Gregory is available as well. The President tonight's going to talk about three big themes: national security, the economy, and values, David, including, as Tim just mentioned, gay marriages.
It's an important attempt, Tom, to reach out to various constituencies. This is a president who has a lot of support among his conservative base, but he also wants to reach out to moderates, to even Democrats, swing voters. But social policy is important. It's a time on the issue of same-sex marriage, which is going to be a big issue in this campaign, to make it very clear to conservatives that he stands by them on this. Something they'll be thinking a lot about as the campaign intensifies.
All right, thanks very much, NBC's David Gregory. The President was there early. He was in the holding room well before the speech was scheduled to begin. That's a direct contrast, of course, to Bill Clinton, his predecessor, who was always running late and was working on his speech in the limousine during one memorable visit to Capitol Hill for the State of the Union. And then there was that time when they rolled the wrong speech in the teleprompter, and George Stephanopoulos, then working for him, had to go down and get the right one loaded in. When we go back to the gallery again, as we will, look for Tom Brady, who is just 2 seats behind Mrs. Bush in the same row. He is in row 3. A number of military people from Iraq, some of them home on leave, are there tonight as well. The Reverend Helen Fleming from the faith-based community, Sister Carol Kean from the religious community.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
Congressional leadership right behind him. That's Bill Frist, who is his Senate Majority Leader, and behind him is Senator Tom Daschle of South Dakota, who is Nancy Pelosi, who is the Democratic leader in the House, will be responding for the Democrats tonight. The President's speech is about 5,000 words. It's expected to run with applause about an hour. The Democrats will have about 12 minutes. We'll be talking as well tonight to John Kerry from Massachusetts. Also, Newt Gingrich will be joining us tonight. We'll be talking to him about the spending that is going on in the Congress. Just today, the Wall Street Journal, very tough editorial against this Republican-dominated body for all the discretionary spending that is going on. Pretty tough for a president even to say to his own party, you've got to stop that in an election year, so we'll see how he finesses that tonight. A long, long tradition of politicians, whatever the occasion. For the last 2 states of the Union, of course, national security has been a primary issue. You'll remember that memorable speech after the attacks of 9/11. And then last year, the controversial 16 words that got so much attention about whether Iraq was trying to get uranium from Niger. NBC chief diplomatic correspondent Andrea Mitchell is watching all of this as well. Andrea, the president will talk tonight about weapons of mass destruction, and that probably will prove to be controversial because there remains a pretty substantial gap between what the administration is claiming and what has been found so far.
Indeed, he's going to speak about weapons-related program activities, not weapons themselves. Last year, as you recall, in addition to the uranium from Niger, he also claimed that there was botulinum toxin and anthrax, that millions of people could be killed. So they've backed off quite a bit, but still not entirely. Tom?
Thanks, Andrea. The president backed by 2 members of his party, Vice President Cheney and Dennis Hastert. Cheney was a football player. Hastert was a wrestling coach. And their physiques and the appetites of politicians reflect that. Red tie night. Latest poll in the hometown newspaper, the Washington Post, as we look at Condoleezza Rice today, shows this is still a very evenly divided country when it comes to domestic issues, and in a mythical matchup for next fall, it shows the country's pretty well divided on that as well.
I have the high privilege and the distinct honor of presenting to you the President of the United States.
Ted Kennedy, who is just back from Iowa, where he helped his friend and fellow Massachusetts Senator John Kerry to a first-place finish. A very outspoken and sharp critic of the president's Iraq policies. At one point saying the war was drummed up down in Texas to help the president's special interest friends.
Mr. Speaker, Vice President Cheney, members of Congress, distinguished guests, and fellow citizens. America this evening is a nation called to great responsibilities, and we are rising to meet them. As we gather tonight, hundreds of thousands of American servicemen and women are deployed across the world in the war on terror. By bringing hope to the oppressed and delivering justice to the violent, they are making America more secure. Each day, law enforcement personnel and intelligence officers are tracking terrorist threats. Analysts are examining airline passenger lists. The men and women of our new Homeland Security Department are patrolling our coasts and borders, and their vigilance is protecting America. Americans are proving once again to be the hardest working people in the world. The American economy is growing stronger. The tax relief you passed is working. Tonight, members of Congress can take pride in the great works of compassion and reform that skeptics had thought impossible. You're raising the standards for our public schools, and you're giving our senior citizens prescription drug coverage under Medicare. We have faced serious challenges together. And now we face a choice. We can go forward with confidence and resolve, or we can turn back to the dangerous illusion that terrorists are not plotting and outlaw regimes are no threat to us. We can press on with economic growth and reforms in education and Medicare, or we can turn back to old policies and old divisions. We've not come all this way through tragedy and trial and war, only to falter and leave our work unfinished. Americans are rising to the tasks of history, and they expect the same from us. In their efforts, their enterprise, and their character, the American people are showing that the state of our union is confident and strong. Our greatest responsibility is the active defense of the American people. 28 months have passed since September the 11th, 2001. Over 2 years without an attack on American soil. And it is tempting to believe that the danger is behind us. That hope is understandable, comforting, and false. The killing has continued in Bali, Jakarta, Casablanca, Riyadh, Mombasa, Jerusalem, Istanbul, and Baghdad. The terrorists continue to plot against America and the civilized world. And by our will and courage, this danger will be defeated. Inside the United States, where the war began, we must continue to give our Homeland Security and law enforcement personnel every tool they need to defend us. And one of those essential tools is the Patriot Act, which allows federal law enforcement to better share information, to track terrorists, to disrupt their cells, and to seize their assets. For years, we have used similar provisions to catch embezzlers and drug traffickers. If these methods are good for hunting criminals, they are even more important for hunting terrorists. Key provisions of the Patriot Act are set to expire next year. The terrorist threat will not expire on that schedule. Our law enforcement needs this vital legislation to protect our citizens. You need to renew the Patriot Act. America is on the offensive against the terrorists who started this war. Last March, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, a mastermind of September the 11th, awoke to find himself in the custody of U.S. and Pakistani authorities. Last August the 11th brought the capture of the terrorist Hambali, who was a key player in the attack in Indonesia that killed over 200 people. We're tracking al-Qaeda around the world, and nearly 2/3 of their known leaders have now been captured or killed. Thousands of very skilled and determined military personnel are on the manhunt, going after the remaining killers who hide in cities and caves, and one by one, we will bring these terrorists to justice. As part of the offensive against terror, we are also confronting the regimes that harbor and support terrorists and could supply them with nuclear, chemical, or biological weapons. The United States and our allies are determined. We refuse to live in the shadow of this ultimate danger. The first to see our determination were the Taliban, who made Afghanistan the primary training base of al-Qaeda killers. As of this month, that country has a new constitution guaranteeing free elections and full participation by women. Businesses are open, healthcare centers are being established, and the boys and girls of Afghanistan are back in school. With the help from the new Afghan army, our coalition is leading aggressive raids against the surviving members of the Taliban and al-Qaeda. The men and women of Afghanistan are building a nation that is free and proud and fighting terror, and America is honored to be their friend. Since we last met in this chamber, combat forces of the United States, Great Britain, Australia, Poland, and other countries enforced the demands of the United Nations, ended the rule of Saddam Hussein, and the people of Iraq are free. Having broken the Ba'athist regime, we face a remnant of violent Saddam supporters. Men who ran away from our troops in battle are now dispersed and attacked from the shadows. These killers, joined by foreign terrorists, are a serious, continuing danger. Yet we're making progress against them. The once all-powerful ruler of Iraq was found in a hole and now sits in a prison cell. Of the top 55 officials of the former regime, we have captured or killed 45. Our forces are on the offensive, leading over 1,600 patrols a day and conducting an average of 180 raids a week. We are dealing with these thugs in Iraq just as surely as we dealt with Saddam Hussein's evil regime. The work of building a new Iraq is hard, and it is right. And America has always been willing to do what it takes for what is right. Last January, Iraq's only law was the whim of one brutal man. Today, our coalition is working with the Iraqi Governing Council to draft a basic law with a Bill of Rights. We're working with Iraqis in the United Nations to prepare for a transition to full Iraqi sovereignty by the end of June. As democracy takes hold in Iraq, the enemies of freedom will do all in their power to spread violence and fear. They are trying to shake the will of our country and our friends. But the United States of America will never be intimidated by thugs and assassins. The killers will fail, and the Iraqi people will live in freedom. Month by month, Iraqis are assuming more responsibility for their own security and their own future. And tonight we are honored to welcome one of Iraq's most respected leaders, the current president of the Iraqi Governing Council, Adnan Pachachi. Sir, America stands with you and the Iraqi people as you build a free and peaceful nation. Because of American leadership and resolve, the world is changing for the better. Last month, the leader of Libya voluntarily pledged to disclose and dismantle all of his regime's weapons of mass destruction programs, including a uranium enrichment project for nuclear weapons. Colonel Gaddafi correctly judged that his country would be better off and far more secure without weapons of mass murder. Nine months of intense negotiations involving the United States and Great Britain succeeded with Libya, while 12 years of diplomacy with Iraq did not. And one reason is clear. For diplomacy to be effective, words must be credible, and no one can now doubt the word of America. Different threats require different strategies. Along with nations in the region, we're insisting that North Korea eliminate its nuclear program. America and the international community are demanding that Iran meet its commitments and not develop nuclear weapons. America is committed to keeping the world's most dangerous weapons out of the hands of the most dangerous regimes. When I came to this rostrum on September the 20th, 2001, I brought the police shield of a fallen officer, my reminder of lives that ended and a task that does not end. I gave to you and to all Americans my complete commitment to securing our country and defeating our enemies. And this pledge, given by one, has been kept by many. You and the Congress have provided the resources for our defense and cast the difficult votes of war and peace. Our closest allies have been unwavering. America's intelligence personnel and diplomats have been skilled and tireless. And the men and women of the American military, they have taken the hardest duty. We've seen their skill and their courage in armored charges, in midnight raids, and lonely hours on faithful watch. We have seen the joy when they return and felt the sorrow when one is lost. I've had the honor of meeting our servicemen and women at many posts, from the deck of a carrier in the Pacific to a mess hall in Baghdad. Many of our troops are listening tonight, and I want you and your families to know America is proud of you, and my administration and this Congress will give you the resources you need to fight and win the war on terror. I know that some people question if America is really in a war at all. They view terrorism more as a crime, a problem to be solved mainly with law enforcement and indictments. After the World Trade Center was first attacked in 1993, some of the guilty were indicted and tried and convicted and sent to prison. But the matter was not settled. The terrorists were still training and plotting in other nations and drawing up more ambitious plans. After the chaos and carnage of September the 11th, it is not enough to serve our enemies with legal papers. The terrorists and their supporters declared war on the United States, and war is what they got. some in this chamber and in our country did not support the liberation of Iraq. Objections to war often come from principled motives. But let us be candid about the consequences of leaving Saddam Hussein in power. We're seeking all the facts. Already, the K report identified dozens of weapons of mass destruction related program activities and significant amounts of equipment that Iraq concealed from the United Nations. Had we failed to act, the dictator's weapons of mass destruction programs would continue to this day. Had we failed to act, Security Council resolutions on Iraq would have been revealed as empty threats, weakening the United Nations and encouraging defiance by dictators around the world. Iraq's torture chambers would still be filled with victims, terrified and innocent. The killing fields of Iraq, where hundreds of thousands of men and women and children vanished into the sands, would still be known only to the killers. For all who love freedom and peace, the world without Saddam Hussein's regime is a better and safer place. Some critics have said our duties in Iraq must be internationalized. This particular criticism is hard to explain to our partners in Britain, Australia, Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, Thailand, Italy, Spain, Poland, Denmark, Hungary, Bulgaria, Ukraine, Romania, the Netherlands. Norway, El Salvador, and the 17 other countries that have committed troops to Iraq. As we debate at home, we must never ignore the vital contributions of our international partners or dismiss their sacrifices. From the beginning, America has sought international support for our operations in Afghanistan and Iraq, and we have gained much support. There is a difference, however, between leading a coalition of many nations and submitting to the objections of a few. America will never seek a permission slip to defend the security of our country. We also hear doubts that democracy is a realistic goal for the greater Middle East, where freedom is rare. Yet it is mistaken and condescending to assume that whole cultures and great religions are incompatible with liberty and self-government. I believe that God has planted in every human heart the desire to live in freedom. And even when that desire is crushed by tyranny for decades, it will rise again. As long as the Middle East remains a place of tyranny and despair and anger, it will continue to produce men and movements that threaten the safety of America and our friends. So America is pursuing a forward strategy of freedom in the greater Middle East. We will challenge the enemies of reform, confront the allies of terror, and expect a higher standard from our friend. To cut through the barriers of hateful propaganda, the Voice of America and other broadcast services are expanding their programming in Arabic and Persian. And soon a new television service will begin providing reliable news and information across the region. I will send you a proposal to double the budget of the National Endowment for Democracy and to focus its new work on the development of free elections and free markets, free press, and free labor unions in the Middle East. And above all, we will finish the historic work of democracy in Afghanistan and Iraq, so those nations can light the way for others and help transform a troubled part of the world. America is a nation with a mission, and that mission comes from our most basic beliefs. We have no desire to dominate, no ambitions of empire. Our aim is a democratic peace, a peace founded upon the dignity and rights of every man and woman. America acts in this cause with friends and allies at our side, yet we understand our special calling. This great republic will lead the cause of freedom. In the last 3 years, adversity has also revealed the fundamental strengths of the American economy. We have come through recession and terrorist attack and corporate scandals and the uncertainties of war. And because you acted to stimulate our economy with tax relief, this economy is strong and growing stronger. You have doubled the child tax credit from $500 to $1,000, reduced the marriage penalty, begun to phase out the death tax, reduced taxes on capital gains and stock dividends, cut taxes on small businesses, and you have lowered taxes for every American who pays income taxes. Americans took those dollars and put them to work, driving this economy forward. The pace of economic growth in the third quarter of 2003 was the fastest in nearly 20 years. New home construction, the highest in almost 20 years. Home ownership rates, the highest ever. Manufacturing activity is increasing. Inflation is low. Interest rates are low. Exports are growing, productivity is high, and jobs are on the rise. These numbers confirm that the American people are using their money far better than government would have, and you were right to return it. America's growing economy is also a changing economy. As technology transforms the way almost every job is done, America becomes more productive, and workers need new skills. Much of our job growth will be found in high-skilled fields like healthcare and biotechnology. So we must respond by helping more Americans gain the skills to find good jobs in our new economy. All skills begin with the basics of reading and math, which are supposed to be learned in the early grades of our schools. Yet for too long, for too many children, those skills were never mastered. By passing the No Child Left Behind Act, you have made the expectation of literacy the law of our country. We're providing more funding for our schools, a 36% increase since 2001. We're requiring higher standards. We are regularly testing every child on the fundamentals. We're reporting results to parents and making sure they have better options when schools are not performing. We are making progress toward excellence for every child in America. But the status quo always has defenders. Some want to undermine the No Child Left Behind Act by weakening standards and accountability. Yet the results we require are really a matter of common sense. We expect third graders to read and do math at the third grade level, and that's not asking too much. Testing is the only way to identify and help students who are falling behind. This nation will not go back to the days of simply shuffling children along from grade to grade without them learning the basics. I refuse to give up on any child, and the No Child Left Behind Act is opening the door of opportunity to all of America's children. At the same time, we must ensure that older students and adults can gain the skills they need to find work now. Many of the fastest growing occupations require strong math and science preparation and training beyond the high school level. So tonight I propose a series of measures called Jobs for the 21st Century. This program will provide extra help to middle and high school students who fall behind in reading and math. Expand advanced placement programs in low-income schools. Invite math and science professionals from the private sector to teach part-time in our high schools. I propose larger Pell Grants for students who prepare for college with demanding courses in high school. I propose increasing our support for America's fine community colleges so they can they can train workers for industries that are creating the most new jobs. By all these actions, we will help more and more Americans to join in the growing prosperity of our country. Job training is important, and so is job creation. We must continue to pursue an aggressive pro-growth economic agenda. Congress has some unfinished business on the issue of taxes. The tax reductions you passed are set to expire. Unless you act, the unfair tax on marriage will go back up. Unless you act, millions of families will be charged $300 more in federal taxes for every child. Unless you act, small businesses will pay higher taxes. Unless you act, the death tax will eventually come back to life. Unless you act, Americans face a tax increase. What Congress has given to Congress should not take away. For the sake of job growth, the tax cuts you passed should be permanent. Our agenda for jobs and growth must help small business owners and employees with relief from needless federal regulation and protect them from junk and frivolous lawsuits. Consumers and businesses need reliable supplies of energy to make our economy run. So I urge you to pass legislation to modernize our electricity system, promote conservation, and make America less dependent on foreign sources of energy. My administration is promoting free and fair trade to open up new markets for America's entrepreneurs and manufacturers and farmers, to create jobs for American workers. Younger workers should have the opportunity to build a nest egg by saving part of their Social Security taxes in a personal retirement account. We should make the Social Security system a source of ownership for the American people. And we should limit the burden of government on this economy by acting as good stewards of taxpayers' dollars. In 2 weeks, I will send you a budget that funds the war, protects the homeland, and meets important domestic needs while limiting the growth in discretionary spending to less than 4%. This will require that Congress focus on priorities, cut wasteful spending, and be wise with the people's money. By doing so, we can cut the deficit in half over the next 5 years. Tonight, I also ask you to reform our immigration laws so they reflect our values and benefit our economy. I propose a new temporary worker program to match willing foreign workers with willing employers when no Americans can be found to fill the job. This reform will be good for our economy because employers will find needed workers in an honest and orderly system. A temporary worker program will help protect our homeland, allowing Border Patrol and law enforcement to focus on true threats to our national security. I oppose amnesty because it would encourage further illegal immigration and unfairly reward those who break our laws. My temporary worker program will preserve the citizenship path for those who respect the law, while bringing millions of hardworking men and women out from the shadows of American life. Our nation's healthcare system, like our economy, is also in a time of change. Amazing medical technologies are improving and saving lives. This dramatic progress has brought its own challenge in the rising costs of medical care and health insurance. Members of Congress, we must work together to help control those costs and extend the benefits of modern medicine throughout our country. Meeting these goals requires bipartisan effort, and 2 months ago you showed the way. By strengthening Medicare and adding a prescription drug benefit, you kept a basic commitment to our seniors. You are giving them the modern medicine they deserve. Starting this year under the law you passed, seniors can choose to receive a drug discount card, saving them 10 to 25% off the retail price of most prescription drugs. And millions of low-income seniors can get an additional $600 to buy medicine. Beginning next year, seniors will have new coverage for preventive screenings against diabetes and heart disease. And seniors just entering Medicare can receive wellness exams. In January of 2006, seniors can get prescription drug coverage under Medicare. For a monthly premium of about $35, most seniors who do not have that coverage today can expect to see their drug bills cut roughly in half. Under this reform, Senior citizens will be able to keep their Medicare just as it is, or they can choose a Medicare plan that fits them best, just as you, as members of Congress, can choose an insurance plan that meets your needs. And starting this year, millions of Americans will be able to save money tax-free for their medical expenses in a health savings account. I sign this measure proudly, and any attempt to limit the choices of our seniors or to take away their prescription drug coverage under Medicare will meet my veto. On the critical issue of health care, our goal is to ensure that Americans can choose and afford private health care coverage that best fits their individual needs. To make insurance more affordable, Congress must act to address rapidly rising health care costs. Small businesses should be able to band together and negotiate for lower insurance rates so they can cover more workers with health insurance. I urge you to pass association health plans. I ask you to give lower-income Americans a refundable tax credit that would allow millions to buy their own basic health insurance. By computerizing health records, we can avoid dangerous medical mistakes, reduce costs, and improve care. To protect the doctor-patient relationship and keep good doctors doing good work, we must eliminate wasteful and frivolous medical lawsuits. And tonight I propose that individuals who buy catastrophic health care coverage as part of our new health savings accounts be allowed to deduct 100% of the premiums from their taxes. A government-run health care system is the wrong prescription. By keeping costs under control, expanding access, and helping more Americans afford coverage, we will preserve the system of private medicine that makes America's health care the best in the world. We're living in a time of great change in our world, in our economy, in science and medicine. Yet some things endure: courage and compassion, reverence and integrity, respect for differences of faith and race. The values we try to live by never change, and they are instilled in us by fundamental institutions such as families and schools and religious congregations. These institutions, these unseen pillars of civilization, must remain strong in America, and we will defend them. We must stand with our families to help them raise healthy, responsible children. When it comes to helping children make right choices, there is work for all of us to do. One of the worst decisions our children can make is to gamble their lives and futures on drugs. Our government is helping parents confront this problem with aggressive education, treatment, and law enforcement. Drug use in high school has declined by 11% over the last 2 years. 400,000 fewer young people are using illegal drugs than in the year 2001. In my budget, I propose new funding to continue our aggressive community-based strategy to reduce demand for illegal drugs. Drug testing in our schools has proven to be an effective part of this effort. So tonight I proposed an additional $23 million for schools that want to use drug testing as a tool to save children's lives. The aim here is not to punish children, but to send them this message: we love you and we do not want to lose you. To help children make right choices, they need good examples. Athletics play such an important role in our society, but unfortunately, some in professional sports are not setting much of an example. The use of performance-enhancing drugs like steroids in baseball, football, and other sports is dangerous, and it sends the wrong message that there are shortcuts to accomplishment and that performance is more important than character. So tonight I call on team owners, union representatives, coaches, and players to take the lead, to send the right signal, to get tough, and to get rid of steroids now. To encourage right choices, we must be willing to confront the dangers young people face, even when they're difficult to talk about. Each year, about 3 million teenagers contract sexually transmitted diseases that can harm them, or kill them, or prevent them from ever becoming parents. In my budget, I propose a grassroots campaign to help inform families about these medical risks. We will double federal funding for abstinence programs so schools can teach this fact of life. Abstinence for young people is the only certain way to avoid sexually transmitted diseases. Decisions children now make can affect their health and character for the rest of their lives. All of us, parents, and schools, and government, must work together to counter the negative influence of the culture and to send the right messages to our children. A strong America must also value the institution of marriage. I believe we should respect individuals as we take a principled stand for one of the most fundamental, enduring institutions of our civilization. Congress has already taken a stand on this issue by passing the Defense of Marriage Act signed in 1996 by President Clinton. That statute protects marriage under federal law as a union of a man and a woman and declares that one state may not redefine marriage for other states. Activist judges, however, have begun redefining marriage by court order without regard for the will of the people and their elected representatives. On an issue of such great consequence, the people's voice must be heard. If judges insist on forcing their arbitrary will upon the people, the only alternative left to the people would be the constitutional process. Our nation must defend the sanctity of marriage. The outcome of this debate is important, and so is the way we conduct it. The same moral tradition that defines marriage also teaches that each individual has dignity and value in God's sight. It's also important to strengthen our communities by unleashing the compassion of America's religious institutions. Religious charities of every creed are doing some of the most vital work in our country, mentoring children, feeding the hungry, taking the hand of the lonely. Yet government has often denied social service grants and contracts to these groups just because they have a cross or a Star of David or a crescent on the wall. By executive order, I've opened billions of dollars in grant money to competition that includes faith-based charities. Tonight, I ask you to codify this into law so people of faith can know that the law will never discriminate against them again. In the past, we've worked together to bring mentors to children of prisoners and provide treatment for the addicted and help for the homeless. Tonight, I ask you to consider another group of Americans in need of help. This year, some 600,000 inmates will be released from prison back into society. We know from long experience that if they can't find work or a home or help, they are much more likely to commit crime and return to prison. So tonight, I propose a 4-year, $300 million prisoner reentry initiative to expand job training and placement services, to provide transitional housing, and to help newly released prisoners get mentoring, including from faith-based groups. America is the land of second chance, and when the gates of the prison open, the path ahead should lead to a better life. For all Americans, the last 3 years have brought tests we did not ask for and achievements shared by all. By our actions, we have shown what kind of nation we are. In grief, we have found the grace to go on. In challenge, we rediscovered the courage and daring of a free people. In victory, we have shown the noble aims and good heart of America. And having come this far, we sense that we live in a time set apart. I've been witness to the character of the people of America, who've shown calm in times of danger, compassion for one another, and toughness for the long haul. All of us have been partners in a great enterprise. And even some of the youngest understand that we are living in historic times. Last month, a girl in Lincoln, Rhode Island, sent me a letter. It began, "Dear George W. Bush, if there's anything you know I, Ashley Pearson, age 10, can do to help anyone, please send me a letter and tell me what I can do to save our country." She added this P.S. If you can send a letter to the troops, please put, "Ashley Pearson believes in you." Tonight, Ashley, your message to our troops has just been conveyed. And yes, you have some duties yourself. Study hard in school, listen to your mom or dad, help someone in need, and when you and your friends see a man or woman in uniform, say thank you. And Ashley, while you do your part, all of us here in this great chamber will do our best to keep you and the rest of America safe and free. My fellow citizens, we now move forward with confidence and faith. Our nation is strong and steadfast. The cause we serve is right because it is the cause of all mankind. The momentum of freedom in our world is unmistakable, and it is not carried forward by our power alone. We can trust in that greater power who guides the unfolding of the years. And in all that is to come, we can know that his purposes are just and true. May God continue to bless America.
President George W. Bush, his report on the State of the Union to the Congress, the House of Representatives, and U.S. Senate, special guest in the balcony, and of course to a nationally televised audience. It ran just under an hour, and there was a great deal more prose and poetry in this election year State of the Union speech. It was a kind of bill of sale outlining what the president wants to continue to do. At the center of his administration, as he believes it, of course, is the war on terror. As he said at one point, terrorists declared war on us, and war is what they got. He also reinforced his conservative base, talking about the need to extend the Patriot Act, to make permanent the tax cuts, about making choices for individuals with Social Security, and the Defense of Marriage Act, which he put out very clearly that if judges continue to undermine it and states allow homosexual marriages, he'll back a constitutional amendment. As for the United Nations, he said we don't need a permission slip to defend America's interests, but at the same time, this administration is going before the UN in an attempt to get help with the Iraqi elections. I'm joined now by NBC's Tim Russert.
Tom, it's so striking to me that the same issues I heard tonight that you talked about, Iraq, tax cut, immigration, Patriot Act, are exactly the same issues I heard in Iowa from the Democrats with a totally different perspective and a different philosophy.
Well, we're going to get a chance to talk about that now because we're going to go to New Hampshire. The man who was triumphant last night in Iowa joins us now. He's at the home of Bob and Chris Chasen, members of the International Firefighters Association, and that's Massachusetts Senator John Kerry. Senator, we couldn't help but notice when the president was talking about what the United States has done for the people of Iraq, your fellow Massachusetts senator and your helpmate on the campaign trail, Senator Edward Kennedy, was plainly expressing his disagreement with all of that. Did you agree with the president's characterization of what the United States has done for the people of Iraq?
No, I think that there's a great deal of wishing in the president's comments tonight. All of us obviously join in celebrating the accomplishments of our troops, and we support the troops, Tom. But I think that the war in Iraq that the president described is very different in its presentation from what's really there. The numbers of troops, the size of the coalition, the quality of the coalition, it's just not real, and Americans know that. More importantly, I think tonight the president really avoided what's on the minds of the people I've been meeting, and he gave in to the major powerful interests of the country, big oil, big drug companies, big HMOs. His health care plan does not do the job for Americans. It doesn't provide health care. And his approach to national security, I mean, Bob Chasen is a firefighter. He was just sitting here talking to me about how they are down in the numbers of firefighters that they need to have. All across the country, Homeland Security has not been properly funded. So there's a great gap. This is a sort of say one thing, do another thing speech, which is just like the say one thing, do another thing administration.
But you've learned in just the past few months how quickly the tide can turn. The American economy now is in a recovery. Democrats are not talking about it in the same way that they were just 4 months ago. If we continue to get the strong indicators that we have seen, by midsummer, isn't going to be more difficult for Democrats to make the economic case against this president?
Tom, first of all, this is not a recovery for the working American. This is a Wall Street Bush League recovery. You know, 250,000 jobs was the target for last month. They created 1,000 jobs. They only fell 249,000 jobs short. And the fact is that the average American, while CEO pay is up and Wall Street profits are up, the average American only earned 3 cents on the hour more. Workers are hurting all across America. They can't afford health care. There's nothing in the president's plan to make health care affordable. They can't afford tuitions. There's nothing in the president's plan to make tuitions affordable. I think there's just two different worlds here. The world the president talks about and the world that Americans are living. And I think that's what we're going to see unfold over the course of these next months.
As the president continues to make his way out of the chamber, Senator Kerry, I was remiss in not congratulating you on your victory last night. I wanted to just show you what the dividend is in the state of New Hampshire, where you are now. This is the latest tracking poll that we have from the Zogby organization.
An address will be given, as we've noted tonight, by the two-party floor leaders in Congress. Senator Dom Daschle.
I'm Tom Daschle of South Dakota, the Democratic leader in the United States Senate.
I'm Nancy Pelosi of California, the Democratic leader in the House of Representatives. The state of our union is indeed strong due to the spirit of the American people, the creativity, optimism, hard work, and faith of everyday Americans. The State of the Union address should offer a vision that unites us as a people and priorities that move us toward the best America. For inspiration, we look to our brave young men and women in uniform, especially those in Iraq and Afghanistan. Their noble service reminds us of our mission as a nation to build a future worthy of their sacrifice. Tonight, from the perspective of 10 years of experience on the Intelligence Committee working on national security issues, I express the Democrats' unbending determination to make the world safer for America, for our people, our interest, and our ideals. Democrats have an unwavering commitment to ensure that America's armed forces remain the best trained, best led, best equipped force for peace the world has ever known. Never before have we been more powerful militarily, but even the most powerful nation in the history of the world must bring other nations to our side to meet common dangers. The president's policies do not reflect that. He has pursued a go-it-alone foreign policy that leaves us isolated abroad and that steals resources we need for education and health care here at home. The president led us into the Iraq War on the basis of unproven assertions without evidence. He embraced a radical doctrine of preemptive war, unprecedented in our history. And he failed to build a true international coalition. Therefore, American taxpayers are bearing almost all the cost, a colossal $120 billion and rising. More importantly, American troops are enduring almost all the casualties, tragically 500 killed and thousands more wounded. As a nation, we must show our greatness, not just our strength. America must be a light to the world, not just a missile. 43 years ago today, as a college student standing in the freezing cold outside this Capitol building, I heard President Kennedy issue this challenge in his inaugural address. My fellow citizens of the world, he said, ask not what America will do for you, but what working together we can do for the freedom of man. There is great wisdom in that, but in it there is also greater strength for our country and the cause of a safer world. Instead of alienating our allies, let us work with them and international institutions so that together we can prevent the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction and keep them out of the hands of terrorists. Instead of billions of dollars in no-bid contracts for politically connected firms like Halliburton and an insistence on American dominance in Iraq, let us share the burden and responsibility with others so that together we can end the sense of American occupation and bring troops home safely when their mission is completed. Instead of the diplomatic disengagement that almost destroyed the Middle East peace process and aggravated the danger posed by North Korea, let us seek to forge agreements and coalitions so that together with others we can address challenges before they threaten the security of the world. We must remain focused on the greatest threat to the security of the United States, the clear and present danger of terrorism. We know what we must do to protect America, but this administration is failing to meet the challenge. Democrats have a better way to ensure our homeland security. 100% of containers coming into our ports or airports must be inspected. Today, only 3% are inspected. 100% of chemical and nuclear plants in the United States must have high levels of security. Today, the Bush administration has tolerated a much lower standard. 100% communication in real time is needed for our police officers, firefighters, and all of our first responders to prevent or respond to a terrorist attack. Today, the technology is there, but the resources are not. 100% of the enriched uranium and other material for weapons of mass destruction must be secured. Today, the administration has refused to commit the resources necessary to prevent it from falling into the hands of terrorists. America will be far safer if we reduce the chance of terrorist attack in one of our cities than if we diminish the civil liberties of our people. As a nation, we must do better to keep faith with our armed forces, their families, and our veterans. Our men and women in uniform show their valor every day. On the battlefield, our troops pledge to leave no soldier behind. Here at home, we must leave no veteran behind. We must ensure their health care, their pensions, and their survivor benefits. The year ahead offers great opportunity for progress and perhaps new perils still hidden in the shadows of an uncertain world. But you, the American people, have shown again and again that you are equal to any test. Now your example summons all of us in government, Republicans and Democrats, to a higher standard. This is personal for all of us, in every community across this land. As a mother of 5, and now as a grandmother of 5, I came into government to help make the future brighter for all of America's children. As much as at any time in my memory, the future of our country and our children is at stake. Democrats are committed to strengthening the state of our union, to reach for a safer, more prosperous America. Together, let us make America work for all Americans. Let us restore our rightful role of leadership in the world, working with others for the freedom of man. I'm now proud to introduce my colleague, the outstanding Senate Democratic leader, Tom Daschle.
Thank you, Leader Pelosi. Let there be no doubt. The state of our union is strong, stronger than the terrorists who seek to harm us, and stronger than the challenges that confront us. At the same time, we know that our union can be stronger still. The President spoke of great goals, and America should never hesitate to push the boundaries of exploration. But neither should we shrink from the great goal of creating a more perfect union here at home. In his speech, the President asked us to double the budget of the National Endowment for Democracy. He asked us to make permanent the tax cuts already passed, and he asked us to use Social Security money to pay for it. For the last couple of weeks, I've been traveling through my home state of South Dakota, visiting the people in small towns that are America's backbone. The folks I met are good people. They're happy to help others around the world, but they're asking something too. What about us? When do our priorities become America's priorities? Rather than a society that restricts its rewards to a privileged few, we need an opportunity society that allows all Americans to succeed. Our opportunity society has as its foundation good jobs, a solid education, and quality health care that is affordable and available. We believe that we have to honor the promises we've made to the millions of families who worked hard, played by the rules, and have earned a retirement of dignity. Our first challenge is to strengthen the economy the right way. The true test of America's economic recovery is not measured simply in quarterly profit reports. It's measured in jobs. The massive tax cuts that were supposed to spark an economic expansion have instead led to an economic exodus. To make up for the 3 million private sector jobs that have been lost on the President's watch, the economy would have to create 226,000 jobs a month through the end of his term. Last month, the economy created only 1,000 new jobs. That's not good enough. America can't afford to keep rewarding the accumulation of wealth over the dignity of work. Instead of borrowing even more money to give more tax breaks to companies so that they can export even more jobs, we propose tax cuts and policies that will strengthen our manufacturing sector and create good jobs at good wages here at home. We can also show our patriotism while strengthening agriculture in rural America by labeling all food products with their country of origin. Education is the second key to our opportunity society. 2 years ago, the President signed a new education law. The heart of that law was a promise. The federal government would set high standards for every student and hold schools responsible for the results. In exchange, schools would receive the resources to meet the new standards. America's schools are holding up their end of the bargain. The President has not held up his. Millions of children are being denied the better teachers, smaller classes, and extra help that they were promised. At the same time, the President's tax cuts have put states in such a bind, they're being forced to raise the cost of college. Since President Bush took office, the average tuition at a four-year public college has increased nearly $600. The America that our parents gave us was a place in which everyone had a chance to go to a good school and then to college, community college, or vocational school, regardless of family income. Our children deserve nothing less. Third, our opportunity society is built on the belief that affordable, available health care is not a luxury, but a basic foundation for a truly compassionate society. Today, 43.6 million Americans, almost all of them from working families, have no health insurance. That's over 3.8 million more than when President Bush took office. Those Americans lucky enough to have health insurance have seen their premiums go up each of the last 3 years. The increase in premiums that middle-income families have seen over the past 3 years is actually larger than the 4-year tax cut that they've been promised. This is an invisible tax increase on middle-class families. Tonight, 3 years into his administration, the President acknowledged that the rapidly rising cost of health care and the increasing number of Americans with no health coverage are problems. But the tax cuts he proposed are not a solution. Tax cuts will do little to make health care more affordable or reduce the number of people without insurance. And they will weaken health coverage for those who have it now. When I was driving around South Dakota this summer, I met a nurse in Sioux Falls who has cancer. She told me she couldn't afford the $1,500 a month her drugs cost. She told me that she was going to die and that she was a lost cause. But she said, "We must solve this problem. Don't turn more people into lost causes." We believe that the federal government should use the power of 40 million Americans to lower prescription drug prices and to allow us to get more affordable drugs from Canada instead of forbidding both. Drug companies and insurance companies are the only ones that benefit from that restriction, not the American people. And that's why we want to change it. In our vision of an opportunity society, promises made to those who have worked a lifetime will be honored in retirement. That's why we believe that America's pension system needs to be strengthened and that Social Security's benefit should be a guarantee, not a gamble. Only when every American who wants to work can, when every child goes to a good school and has the opportunity to go further, only when health care is available and affordable for every American, when a lifetime of work guarantees retirement with dignity, and when America is secure at home and our strength abroad is respected, not resented, only then will we have a union as strong as the American people. Thank you for listening. Good night, and God bless America.
So the two floor leaders, House and Senate, Nancy Pelosi from the House, Tom Daschle from the Senate, take a crack at what everyone agrees from both parties is the unenviable chore of trying to respond to the President's State of the Union address when he stands before this enormous audience from both houses in the majesty of the House chamber and delivers this official address that is envisioned, I think, in the Constitution. And then, of course, there is this response delivered in a largely empty room to television cameras by members of the opposition at not nearly as great length and with not nearly the trappings and the response evident in the room. It is not an easy task. Pelosi and Daschle had a go at it, painting a quite different vision of the country than the one described by the president. It is also a tricky job because you have to say, yes, the State of the Union is strong and so on, and you have to praise the president's goals. After all, they're commendable goals. And then go on to make the point that he's not anywhere near meeting them and your programs are. Well, tough job.
Well, look, the Democrats or the opposition party is always at a disadvantage here. The president's at the, in the House chamber, and all his cohorts in his party are standing up, and these guys look ridiculous. They're sitting, as the opposition party always does, sitting apart from each other. What were they, at a fireplace? I guess they did all right, but I think Nancy Pelosi in particular said a couple of amazing things. One is that America must be a light to the world, not just a missile. What does that mean? I'm not quite sure. But
I think she must have reflected the fact that we are displaying our military might in Iraq and Afghanistan and perhaps elsewhere.
Is that right? Okay, good. I'm glad you clarified that. And then she said, as much as any time in my memory, the future of our country and our children is at stake. Well, I think she was alive in World War II and maybe during the Cold War and the Korean War and the Vietnam War. I think our future, the future of our country, is not quite as at stake now as it was in those eras.
Well, I mean, you would agree that we are at war with terrorists who are attempting to acquire weapons of mass destruction, except during the Cold War when the Russians threatened us with weapons of mass destruction. This is as perilous a time as we've ever faced, I think.
How about World War II?
Well, Fred, look, you can't have it both ways. You can't say that the Democrats are treating this as a criminal problem when it's a war on terrorism. It is a war on terrorism, and we are menaced here.
All right,
now, wait, just let me finish. I mean, the Democrats have appropriated now a term, the Opportunity Society, first, I think, originated by Newt Gingrich, who, had a group called the
Conservative Opportunity Society.
Right. And
in the House, right?
Yeah. And this Stan Greenberg, who's just published a new book about how the Democrats can break out of the mire that they're in, is saying that the Democrats should be Opportunity Society Democrats. And so this was the kind of a laundry list of what they think we need to do, which includes health insurance.
Yeah, I think America should be a missile, not a light to the world. I like that image, flying around. It's good. Since we just came back from Iowa, John Kerry and John Edwards, to take two of the leading Democratic presidential candidates, give a pretty good speech, actually. And if you're a Democrat, maybe even if you're an independent or a liberal Republican, you could be half convinced by it that George Bush has done a bad job in all sorts of ways. These congressional leaders did not do that, I think. They did their duty, I guess. It's an impossible situation. I guess I would say Republicans shouldn't be fooled that this is the quality of the rhetoric and the quality of the opposition they're going to get in the real election year.
Well, let's talk to another congressional leader. Democratic Senator John Breaux of Louisiana joins us now from Statuary Hall. Senator, good evening. Welcome to you.
Good evening, Brett. How are you?
Give me your capsule reaction to the State of the Union address you heard tonight in the chamber.
Brett, I don't know if you felt the same way. I thought it was relatively a mild speech. I mean, I thought that it was sort of understated. He spent about half of it talking about Iraq and national security. I think he needed to do that. He talked about some things that we all know is not going to happen, like making the tax cut permanent. Getting the uninsured covered this year is not going to happen, although he outlined a plan to do that. And whatever happened to Mars? I thought we were going to hear something about Mars tonight. We never heard that. I thought it was relatively low in tone. I think it was well received by the Congress, and he outlined some things that might get started in this Congress.
Well, what did you hear anything among the initiatives that he proposed that you think could pass?
Yeah, I thought one that was a new idea, Brett, was the idea about doing something for prisoners who get out of prison and now go right back in within a matter of weeks or a matter of months. I think that's something you could have bipartisan support for. It's a real serious problem for this country, and I thought it was received by both sides of the aisle quite well.
Did you sense that this president while obviously he didn't do it in any direct sense tonight, is kind of raring to go to get on the campaign trail and rebut his critics and who have been out having kind of a clear shot at him now for several months?
Brett, I don't think we heard that tonight. I mean, I thought it was.
That's what I was saying. He didn't do it tonight.
He didn't do it tonight. I thought it was sort of a low-key speech in a political year. I thought maybe he's trying to be presidential, which is certainly the proper way to handle it. But it was sort of a low-key speech. It wasn't really a political speech. I think he gave us a state of the nation as far as the military was concerned. Came out with a couple of new ideas, but nothing really high risk.
Let me see if I can draw you out on the events of last night and perhaps today. The Democratic race seems to have been, it seems locked in place for so long, seems now to be scrambled and the prize very much up for grabs. And there's been a tremendous amount of talk today, not only about the fact that Howard Dean finished so far below what had been expected, but his reaction to it in a very energetic speech to his followers last night in Iowa. What did you make of all that?
Well, I think the angry people in our party may be coming to their senses in the sense that I think Howard Dean was the angriest of all the candidates, and I think that caught on in the beginning, but I think it slipped and they deserted him and they went to a more reasoned approach. Certainly John Edwards, as it was a candidate of hope and optimism out there, it wasn't that critical of his fellow campaigners, and I think John Kerry sort of came out ahead because of his experience, his maturity, and I think that that type of positive campaign is also always going to win in the end, ultimately.
Do you sense that the Dean's moment may now have passed?
I think it has. I mean, I think people just don't want an angry candidate who tends to lose his temper, but rather one that they could trust the management of this country with. And no matter what people might say about you, you need a cool, calm, and collected leader. And I think he showed that perhaps he doesn't meet that criteria.
All right. Senator Breaux, it's always good to talk to you. Thanks very much for taking the time.
Thank you.
You bet. Interesting comments from Senator Breaux on the political situation.
They were mildly worded, but I think it was a very strong criticism of Howard Dean, saying his time has come and passed.
Obituary, I would say. You know, declared him practically dead.
Well, of course, it's not with all the endorsements that came from members of Congress, and of course, at the time of as the Iowa caucuses got underway out there, Dean actually had more congressional endorsements than anyone else. I think there'll be,
including Gephardt.
Yeah, including Dick Gephardt. I think more now will come, and the question, of course, is whether Dean will get any more of them after.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see whether any of them flake off. Probably not, but you'd think that there were a lot of people who were deeply disappointed by the performance.
Let's go back to Statuary Hall, where our colleague Brian Wilson is standing with the House Majority Leader Tom DeLay. Brian?
That's right. Tom DeLay and I have been talking, and he said just before we came on the air, you were surprised at how direct the president was. You thought he didn't parse his words too much.
Well, I think he's heard a lot of criticism and attacks from the Democrats, and he answered those attacks, and it hit them right between the eye. I thought it was very exciting. I was very excited about the president standing up for why we're in Iraq, and then talking about exporting democracy and the economy, and certainly protecting the American family. I was very pleased.
Was there any surprise in there for you? Did you raise an eyebrow and say, wow, I didn't expect him to say that?
Well, I'll tell you, when he said, you fool around with Medicare and I'll veto it, I haven't seen a president be so direct before. I was very surprised that he spent so much time on Iraq and the war on terror to really establish why we're doing what we're doing and all the successes that we've been able to have.
Now, he laid out a pretty aggressive agenda for Congress, things he'd like to see accomplished, and that, of course, falls on your shoulders to see if you can make that happen. Can you make the tax cuts permanent, for example?
Well, I think we're going to give it a shot. We've been able to pass in the House tax cuts every year for 10 years. We're getting pretty used to it, so I think we'll get it out of the House for sure. It'll be pretty tough getting it through the Senate. But I think if the American people don't want their taxes raised by eliminating the child tax credit or going back and penalizing people for being married or raising their marginal income tax rates, then they'll contact their senators and we'll get it through the Senate.
All right, thank you much. Majority Leader Tom DeLay, thanks for dropping by here today. As he points out, the House does usually support the president across the board. The more difficult row to hoe is in the Senate. Britt, back to you.
Brian, thank you. Hill and the Senate Majority Leader, who is with our Brian Wilson. Brian?
Thank you, Britt. We talked to the Majority Leader of the House a moment ago, and now we have the Majority Leader of the Senate. The president laid out a very aggressive agenda that he'd like to see Congress accomplish this year. That falls on your shoulders. You're the man who has to make it happen, and in the Senate, the rowing is pretty tough sometimes. Can you do some of the things the president wants to get accomplished this year?
Brian, we will. And one of the great things, one of the real privileges of being in the United States Senate, being a majority leader of the Senate, is that this president paints a vision, and it's up to us to complete that portrait. And he did it with HIV/AIDS funding in the State of the Union last year, $15 billion. Here we are a year later, and we've delivered on that $15 billion commitment to fight global HIV/AIDS. Last year, he talked about Medicare and prescription drugs. Politicians have been talking about it for years. Campaigns, Democrats and Republicans. This president called for it. Sure enough, a year later, we delivered prescription drug coverage for 40 million seniors. Now, this year, we're going to have to do exactly the same thing. When the president talked about the uninsured, the cost of health care today, it is the #1 problem that we're facing. He laid out an agenda. He said, let's help people, refundable tax credits, put association health plans. We'll take it to the floor of the Senate. We'll do our best to pass it.
You're sounding optimistic there, but I want to ask you one other question, and that is, were there any surprises in this speech for you? Did you hear anything that just caught your ear and you went, wow, I didn't expect that?
Well, the things that I certainly did not expect, things like the steroids, the drugs, the athletes, the transition from prisons, all of which are very important, and all of which clearly mean a lot to him, and they fill that whole category of compassion, of caring, doing the unexpected, a little bit like HIV/AIDS was unexpected last year.
Senator Frist, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be with you, Brian.
Britt, back to you.
Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you, Senator Frist. We've got to take a brief break. We'll be back with final thoughts on State of the Union tonight and the beginning of the final stretch of the New Hampshire primary as well. First, Fred Barnes.
I kind of agreed with John Breaux, the senator from Louisiana, who said, you know, this really didn't signal the start of the president's campaign. It was a defense of his policies and not even a particularly spirited one. The difference is you will know when the Bush campaign begins. It's going to produce shock and awe because Bush has so much money to spend on ads. He will mobilize so many people. He will send out so many surrogates. It will be quite different, and it hasn't started yet.
Yeah, I thought this speech was written with the president thinking that the election campaign was going to be easy, that Howard Dean was going to be the opponent, that he didn't have to stretch very far, that you didn't have to reach out very much to moderate voters. I mean, there was nothing. There was nothing. I mean, very little compassionate conservatism in this to reach out to swing voters.
Compassionate conservatism, as defined by you, means lots of new programs, right? Lots of new government programs of the kind of Democrats like, right?
There was the immigration reform had been announced previously. That's something, and I guess taking care of prisoners when they get out of prison shows some compassion. Right. But health care insurance is the issue that the Democrats are going to make.
All right, more good going, Bill.
I thought the president's speech was the second most interesting speech of the week. Couldn't compete with Governor Dean's non-concession speech last night. I wonder if the president has kind of a mischievous sense of humor. I wonder if it crossed his mind to end with a quick recitation of all the states and the final, yeah! That would have livened up the State of the Union.
All right, that is about it for us. One thing we want to mention, the program note, is on Thursday evening in New Hampshire, a debate among the Democratic candidates. I will moderate it. We'll be right here on the Fox News Channel. In the meantime, that's it for us. Stay tuned for Hannity and Combs, and following that show, On the Record with Greta Van Susteren. I'm Britt Hume, Fox News, Washington.
Union address. Live from Washington, George W. Bush delivers his annual report on America to Congress and the country. Tonight, you will hear the president's speech and the Democratic leadership's response. Also, we'll take an in-depth look at the candidate push and the field of Democratic contenders as we look ahead to the issues and the personalities of Decision 2004.
From Washington, D.C., the State of the Union address. Here now, Tom Brokaw.
Good evening from the nation's capital. President George W. Bush speaks to Congress tonight and the nation on the State of the Union, a report required by the Constitution under Article 2 for a sitting president who wants to be reelected. This is a matchless opportunity to get his campaign started on his terms with a national television audience across the networks. And this is the scene tonight in the House chamber where security is exceptionally tight.
Mr. Speaker, the President's cabinet.
Members of the cabinet coming in now. There will be one missing member. The reason there is one missing member, Secretary of State Colin Powell, if something catastrophic happens in the House chamber, there would be someone to organize the government. And we're told tonight it's the President's good friend Don Evans, Secretary of Commerce, who is at an undisclosed location as his fellow cabinet members sit in the chamber and offer their support for the President of the United States. No need to introduce Don Rumsfeld, one of the best-known members of this cabinet or any cabinet in recent memory. John Ashcroft, the Attorney General, coming in right behind him, the keeper of the Patriot Act. Secretary of the Interior. Members of the U.S. Supreme Court will be there as well. Members of the United States Senate and House, and of course, a big, big buzz in that chamber tonight is the political theater of the last 24 hours with the stunning upset last night in Iowa. John Kerry going from almost worst to first in Iowa in very short order, followed closely by another sitting United States Senator, John Edwards. They're in New Hampshire tonight, not here, as they continue their campaign for the Democratic presidential nomination. I said just a few moments ago that I don't remember a time when the United States Capitol was so tightly secured as it is now, not just for this occasion, but obviously during the Orange Alert as well. There are guards everywhere, new procedures for getting in and out of the building, iron gates in the parking lots. Tom Ridge, the Director of Homeland Security. And beneath every chair in the House chamber is this foil package that contains a hood in case there is a chemical or biological attack. We don't know whether the seats in the House gallery also have these, but that is just symptomatic of what is going on in Washington, D.C. Up in the gallery, in the visitors' gallery tonight, of course, we'll see Mrs. Bush. Joyce Rumsfeld is the Secretary of the Defense Secretary. And we'll have some special guests tonight, including the Patriots quarterback, Tom Brady, who we're told has a sports camp. Now, he happens to be from Massachusetts, the home state of John Kerry, which now has a Republican governor. I'm joined by Tim Russert, our Washington bureau chief and moderator of Meet the Press. Tim, the political operation of the White House leaves nothing to chance and seizes every opportunity.
Absolutely not, Tom. Within 12 hours of John Kerry winning the Iowa caucuses, the real hero of Boston, Tom Brady, the quarterback, sitting by the president.
We'll be talking to him about the spending that is going on in the Congress. Just today, the Wall Street Journal, very tough editorial against this Republican-dominated body for all the discretionary spending that is going on. Pretty tough for a president even to say to his own party, you've got to stop that in an election year. So we'll see how he finesses that tonight. A long, long tradition of politicians, whatever the occasion. For the last two states of the Union, of course, national security has been a primary issue. You'll remember that memorable speech after the attacks of 9/11. And then last year, the controversial 16 words that got so much attention about whether Iraq was trying to get uranium from Niger. NBC chief diplomatic correspondent Andrea Mitchell is watching all of this as well. Andrea, the president will talk tonight about weapons of mass destruction, and that probably will prove to be controversial because there remains a pretty substantial gap between what the administration is claiming and what has been found so far.
Indeed, he's going to speak about weapons-related program activities, not weapons themselves. Last year, as you recall, in addition to the uranium from Niger, he also claimed that there was botulinum toxin and anthrax, that millions of people could be killed. So they've backed off quite a bit, but still not entirely. Tom?
Thanks, Andrea. The President backed by two members of his party, Vice President Cheney and Dennis Hastert. Cheney was a football player, Hastert was a wrestling coach, and their physiques and the appetites of politicians reflect that. Red tie night. Latest poll in the hometown newspaper, the Washington Post, as we look at Condoleezza Rice today, shows this is still a very evenly divided country when it comes to domestic issues, and in a mythical matchup for next fall, it shows the country's pretty well divided on that as well.
I have the high privilege and the distinct honor of presenting to you the President of the United States.
Ted Kennedy, who is just back from Iowa, where he helped his friend and fellow Massachusetts Senator John Kerry to a first-place finish. A very outspoken and sharp critic of the president's Iraq policies. At one point saying the war was drummed up down in Texas to help the president's special interest friends.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Vice President Cheney, members of Congress, distinguished guests, and fellow citizens. America this evening is a nation called to great responsibilities, and we are rising to meet them. As we gather tonight, hundreds of thousands of American servicemen and women are deployed across the world in the war on terror. By bringing hope to the oppressed and delivering justice to the violent, they are making America more secure. Each day, law enforcement personnel and intelligence officers are tracking terrorist threats. Analysts are examining airline passenger lists. The men and women of our new Homeland Security Department are patrolling our coasts and borders, and their vigilance is protecting America. Americans are proving once again to be the hardest working people in the world. The American economy is growing stronger. The tax relief you passed is working. Tonight, members of Congress can take pride in the great works of compassion and reform that skeptics had thought impossible. You're raising the standards for our public schools, and you're giving our senior citizens prescription drug coverage under Medicare. We have faced serious challenges together. And now we face a choice. We can go forward with confidence and resolve, or we can turn back to the dangerous illusion that terrorists are not plotting and outlaw regimes are no threat to us. We can press on with economic growth and reforms in education and Medicare, or we can turn back to old policies and old divisions. We've not come all this way through tragedy and trial and war, only to falter and leave our work unfinished. Americans are rising to the tasks of history, and they expect the same from us. In their efforts, their enterprise, and their character, The American people are showing that the state of our union is confident and strong. Our greatest responsibility is the active defense of the American people. 28 months have passed since September the 11th, 2001. Over 2 years without an attack on American soil. And it is tempting to believe that the danger is behind us. That hope is understandable, comforting, and false. The killing has continued in Bali, Jakarta, Casablanca, Riyadh, Mombasa, Jerusalem, Istanbul, and Baghdad. The terrorists continue to plot against America and the civilized world. And by our will and courage, this danger will be defeated. Inside the United States, where the war began, we must continue to give our Homeland Security and law enforcement personnel every tool they need to defend us. And one of those essential tools is the Patriot Act, which allows federal law enforcement to better share information, to track terrorists, to disrupt their cells, and to seize their assets. For years, we have used similar provisions to catch embezzlers and drug traffickers. If these methods are good for hunting criminals, they are even more important for hunting terrorists. Key provisions of the Patriot Act are set to expire next year. The terrorist threat will not expire on that schedule. Our law enforcement needs this vital legislation to protect our citizens. You need to renew the Patriot Act. America is on the offensive against the terrorists who started this war. Last March, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, a mastermind of September the 11th, awoke to find himself in the custody of U.S. and Pakistani authorities. Last August the 11th brought the capture of the terrorist Hambali, who was a key player in the attack in Indonesia that killed over 200 people. We're tracking al-Qaeda around the world, and nearly 2/3 of their known leaders have now been captured or killed. Thousands of very skilled and determined military personnel are on the manhunt, going after the remaining killers who hide in cities and caves, and one by one, we will bring these terrorists to justice. As part of the offensive against terror, we are also confronting the regimes that harbor and support terrorists and could supply them with nuclear, chemical, or biological weapons. The United States and our allies are determined. We refuse to live in the shadow of this ultimate danger. The first to see our determination were the Taliban, who made Afghanistan the primary training base of al-Qaeda killers. As of this month, that country has a new constitution, guaranteeing free elections.
Designation, watching the State of the Union speech. You'll also hear in the president's speech, he talks about the whole issue of gay marriages, referring to court decisions, a Massachusetts court decision about same-sex marriage. This is a political speech as well as a substantive policy speech. It's a blueprint for the 2004 re-election campaign of George W. Bush.
It's also worth pointing out that while Article 2 requires the president to make a report from time to time on the State of the Union, a speech is not required, and there is no set scheduling. It is not by coincidence that this speech has been scheduled, Mrs. Bush there, that this speech has been scheduled, obviously, 24 hours after the Iowa caucuses, whatever that can do on behalf of this Republican president to keep his message in front of the American people. That was not coincidental. We're looking now for the members of the, looking for Joyce Rumsfeld. First of all, Karen Hughes is sitting in the back row there. Actually, David Gregory is available as well. The president tonight's going to talk about three big themes: national security, the economy, and values, David, including, as Tim just mentioned, gay marriages.
It's an important attempt, Tom, to reach out to various constituencies. This is a president who has a lot of support among his conservative base, but he also wants to reach out to moderates, to even Democrats, swing voters. But social policy is important. It's a time on the issue of same-sex marriage, which is going to be a big issue in this campaign, to make it very clear to conservatives that he stands by them on this. I mean, they'll be thinking a lot about as the campaign intensifies.
All right, thanks very much, NBC's David Gregory. The president was there early. He was in the holding room well before the speech was scheduled to begin. That's a direct contrast, of course, to Bill Clinton, his predecessor, who was always running late and was working on his speech in the limousine during one memorable visit to Capitol Hill for the State of the Union. And then there was that time when they rolled the wrong speech in the teleprompter, and George Stephanopoulos, then working for him, had to go down and get the right one loaded in. When we go back to the gallery again, as we will, look for Tom Brady, who is just 2 seats behind Mrs. Bush in the same row. He is in row 3. A number of military people from Iraq, some of them home on leave, are there tonight as well. The Reverend Helen Fleming from the faith-based community, Sister Carol Kean from the religious community.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
Congressional leadership right behind him. That's Bill Frist, who is his Senate Majority Leader, and behind him is Senator Tom Daschle of South Dakota, who is Nancy Pelosi, who is the Democratic leader in the House, will be responding for the Democrats tonight. The president's speech is about 5,000 words. It's expected to run with applause about an hour. The Democrats will have about 12 minutes. We'll be talking as well tonight to John Kerry from Massachusetts. Also, Newt Gingrich will be joining us tonight.